What's up, everyone? Thralls of Metal here once again. I'm Necrognick, and I have an album review for you. Once again, this one is brought to us courtesy of Screaming Toilet. Again, it's a fun site full of reviews, podcasts, all sorts of cool pop culture stuff. Plus, we're there, so come check us out. So today I'm reviewing the debut full-length from Evoked with their album Ravenous Compulsion. This came out on September 27th on FDA Records. This band is from Germany, and they formed in 2013, so this is a pretty new band. I believe they have one EP and some demos, and again, this is their first full-length album. So it opens up with Resurrect the Source, and right away the death metal nostalgia starts hitting me because this sounds fiercely old school and very much in the vein of early death metal when it still had a lot of thrash metal to it. Very chuggy, definitely reminiscent of a band like Pestilence, especially because the vocals sound a lot like Martin Van Druin, and overall this has also a big Asphyx feel to it in terms of the overall heft of it. Big chuggy guitars, very thrashy, very just high energy right away. I really like the song right away. It had great hooks in it, and once again it reminded me of the stuff that got me into death metal right away, so you're already doing pretty good there, guys. And one thing I really liked about this was the thrashy sections in this, and there are a lot of them. It definitely reminded me a lot more of very gritty thrash like Possessed or early Sepultura when it still kind of bordered on death metal. And then when you couple that with the groovy sections that are very reminiscent of bands like Morgoth, Obituary, and especially Death, a lot of this album has a fierce death sound to it, almost like a stripped down version of Leprosy. It doesn't favor a lot of very intricate parts or lead work. You know, it's very meat and potatoes, but it has that old school death feel to it that is almost undeniable. And the next song, Not of Human Flesh, even includes a really cool bridge on it that even kind of harks back to early Metallica, definitely around like Ride the Lightning. This very thick, crunchy guitar tone that comes in is just absolutely awesome and it works so well with this. Excellent stuff within the first two tracks. Now the third track, The Trophy, I thought was an exceptional one as well, and that's kind of a theme here because I thought all the tracks were really good, so it's kind of hard for me to pick exceptionally good ones on here because a lot of these are just really well executed. Again, within this one you kind of hear those early formative years for death metal where it was still a lot of just heavy thrash, but just this sort of newfound aggression and almost evil sound to it. The song does exceptionally well at pairing that nice Obituary groove, which pretty much pervades their entire discography, and then kind of melding it with a very thrashy death metal, much like early Vader. Even the production on this really reminds me a lot of Obituary. It's very raw sounding, but it's very polished. Everything is well separated. Nothing sounds muddy. It's just very gritty sounding. And I love that sort of shit. Now, as I listened to this, I sort of realized this is definitely a lot of worship and tribute. These guys are definitely emulating the bands that they love, and you can hear it 100%. And while worship and tribute sort of things can kind of get a little dull because, yes, you've heard it before, and you may have heard it better, but it comes down to execution at that point, and these guys execute very well. Every song is loaded with really good hooks, really good dynamics. Not a lot of lead work, but these guys are very much about strong riffs and memorable moments and just bringing outright heft. Very groove-laden, and it keeps your head banging the entire time, and that's the sort of shit I absolutely love. Now the song Into Obliteration actually opens up with more of a tremolo riff, which honestly doesn't pop up much on here. Most of the album is very thrashy, lots of palm-muted chugs and triplets. This one actually had a bit more of like a kind of a Morbid Angel feel to it. Now, while this one does stand out for just a very simple reason, it has kind of a different style of riff in here. A lot of the songs are very similar, but each song is loaded with a lot of good hooks, and it keeps you interested. At least it did for me. They stay intense, they stay fun, they stay kind of loose, and all this sounds like it'd be absolutely kick-ass live. So, to a degree, I can dismiss similar-sounding songs as long as the execution's there and they keep with the feel of the album. In death metal, you can't be dull, and this hasn't felt dull at any point in this album, honestly. And possibly another complaint I can make is this album rarely ever slows down, but towards the end there are moments where they bring in some slower moments, maybe a touch more atmospheric, and even work in some cool guitar harmonies, which kind of break up the chuggy riff fest, which I love that, but I needed a little bit something different, and I started getting more of that later on the album. Now, one complaint you can make on this, the album really never slows down, and up to this point that was true until the song Desolate Animation, which actually brings in some slower elements, and finally kind of lets some atmosphere build in there. Granted, I love fast, furious death metal all the time, but I kind of need a break every now and then. I like hearing some cool groovier sections, and even some slower, almost death doom sections, because those parts just absolutely crush as far as raw heaviness. So towards the end of this song, it actually does get slower, and that actually really needed it, because I thought the album just needed to let off the gas just a little bit, just to breathe. Festering Alive opens up with a killer distinct riff, and it kind of starts working on this moment before exploding into a very thrashy section once again. Now, I kind of wish they had worked that opening riff a little bit more, but that opening riff comes back later, so they were smart to bring back what I thought was a very catchy moment in there, and keep this from just kind of falling into a blender of fast songs. This is also the first song on here that actually features some blast beats, so once again, some small little intricacies that actually make these songs sound a little bit different, even though they are still very similar. Now, the song also closes with a really cool slower section that actually builds a bit of atmosphere too, which again, this album is generally very fast. Now, this song also closes with a really cool slower moment that I thought was really exceptional too, and once again, bringing in these moments later on the album keeps some freshness there. Now, the last track, Putrid Faith, actually fades in, which I thought was really cool because you really didn't hear that in the rest of the album. Most of these songs just erupt right away. This one took a little bit of time sort of building it up, just a little bit of feedback, and it just made it a little bit different. Now, I figured this one was going to be the big, slow closer, but it does break into, once again, their very fast, thrashy selves. And honestly, I really can't complain because it's still very well executed and, again, loaded with cool, awesome triplet chugs, and it's just catchy right away. Now, like, they squeeze in some occasional blast beats in between these cool palm-muted chugs, but then they also bring in some cool punk elements, almost kind of a D-beat section, which, again, isn't something that really pops up much on this album. So there are some surprises later on the album, which is something I generally look for. Now, this also moves into a really cool melodic section. I thought it just sounded like creepy. It had a cool lead melody across the main riff, and it really actually had some more atmosphere to it. Now, this song has a killer sort of slow end to it, where the snare has that interesting fade-in that you'd hear on Pantera's Domination, and it really just makes that moment so much heavier. Just that little minor tweak, for some odd reason, really worked for me. I thought it was really well done. So all in all, I thought this was a killer debut from these guys, which is why I want to give it 4.5 stars. Solid songwriting. Granted, they're similar, but you kind of run into that in a lot of albums, and what mattered was execution and the fact that every single song on here had a killer hook to it. I was drawn into every single one, and yes, there was a lot of worship and tribute, but they were tributing a lot of bands that I absolutely love, and it didn't sound like a dime store version of any of those bands. It sounded very close to the source material, not to the point where they were plagiarizing, but to the point where they definitely love those bands as much as I do, and unlike me, they can play. Solid album. It's kind of short. It's only 32 minutes, but I really couldn't find anything on here that I flat out didn't like. I enjoyed just about every single second on it. Maybe some minor tweaks in terms of songwriting, but outside of that, this is a great album. I really enjoyed this, and honestly, this might be one of the best ones I've heard on FDA Records this year, and I listened to quite a bit of their stuff. So, if you like the review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do shit like this all the time. Catch you guys later.